All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for joining. Got quite the turnout. It looks like we got about 45 people here this evening. About 140 people registered. So I think a few people might trickle in. So thank you for waiting. We just wanted to get everybody in the waiting room and then load everybody in. So my name is Keegan, and I'm the founder of mindfulMEDS. And I'm thrilled to be here this evening. Thrilled to be here for many reasons. Um, and I just wanted to share. Why doesn't everybody just let us know who you are, where you're from in the chat room? Let us know where you've connected with us from. And I'm just going to let you guys know how the night's going to unfold. And so I think what we'd love to do is really briefly just kind of share a bit of my story, how this began, and then I'm going to pass it over to Brett, and he's going to share a bit of his story and how his connection with this began. And then we're going to talk about just some things that I think people need to know when it comes to our experience or 5 years of building this company, the thousands upon thousands of conversations that we've had, the anecdotal research that's come back, some of the scientific research we're going to speak about. And I think most importantly, at the tail end of this, we're going to save about 45 minutes, half an hour, 45 minutes, and everybody's going to have an opportunity to ask anything they'd like. So we'll just wait till the end. And the way that that's going to work is if you could simply just raise your hand. So I think there's a way, I was told there's a way to just raise your hand. Hopefully that is the case. And then we'll have you unmuted and you can come out, you can speak to the community, share your question, and either Brett or myself will answer it for you. So again, you always hear people say how grateful they are, at the start of these things. And it's just like, everybody says that. But this time around for me, so incredibly grateful. I didn't expect to be here tonight. Anybody that knows a little bit of my story, I had what is considered an NDE, a near-death experience, less than 65 days ago. And, just beyond grateful to have my health back underneath me, to be here tonight, to share this with you, and just to be alive. And so I hope that works for everybody. I guess my story and what I wanted to share, I'm 39 years old, just turned 39. So I'm going to squeeze my 39 years into 3 minutes. But, I really started in 2007. I was 23 years old. I had just graduated from the college, from a business program. I was just about to enter into what they call a 2+2. So I was transferring into the university, and I was just really excited. I was excited about who I was becoming. I was excited about my future. And one phone call changed the trajectory of really the rest of my life. I don't know if anybody can relate to just receiving a phone call that floored them or a moment that changed them, but this was mine. I received a call from the girl that I was with, and we had been together for almost 4 years, and she broke up with me. And it doesn't sound like much, but I can tell you I wasn't ready to for that. My parents at the exact same time had retired, and they were on a trip around the world. And what I realized was it wasn't really the breakup, but it was I had re-triggered some abandonment issues that had happened in my life way earlier, and I was lost. So I showed up at university, and all my friends from high school were, I shouldn't say all of them, but many of them were going to school with me. I was going to the University of Lethbridge, just about 2 hours outside of Calgary, where I grew up. And I remember showing up in class, and I was a different version of myself. I couldn't look people in the eyes for the first time in my life. I literally couldn't lift my head up off the table. And within a matter of 2 weeks, I dropped out of university. I stopped showing up at class. I wasn't sleeping, and I started this relationship with alcohol. And what's interesting, when I spoke about being on top of the world, I'd actually had the summer job lined up in New York City that I started May 1st. And so here I am. It's January. I drop out of school, and I'm this size and this weight. And And I showed up in New York City and I had been drinking for 150 days in a row. And I had gained about 40 pounds. And I was overweight. And I remember flying to New York from Calgary and realizing that I wasn't coming home. I had committed that I was so depressed at that stage that I wasn't coming home. I was going to kill myself. And I just remember this one story that I'm going to share, and the building that we were living in, I'll never forget it. It was 28 stories high, and I remember being on top of the building, and we had some fun nights up there. We went up there and smoked cigars a couple times and drank champagne, and one night I found myself up in this building alone, and I remember sitting or standing with my feet looking up over the edge, the concrete barrier, and looking down at the ground. And that summer in New York was there was a garbage strike, and there was garbage littered all over the ground. And I just remember thinking to myself, shit, my parents are gonna have to come and scrape me up, my guts off the ground. And whatever happened, I didn't jump that night, but I was so close. I was a microsecond away from killing myself. Whew. Still hard to speak about. And so began this 9-year journey of putting one little thing in front of me. And luckily, what actually saved my life was my sister was getting married at the end of August. This was in June. And so I just said, you know what? I'm gonna find my way to this wedding. I'm gonna say goodbye to everybody, and then I'm gonna do it. And so it just kept on having these little carrots to chase for the next 9 years of my life. And the alcoholism grew and grew and grew. I was a master at hiding it. Literally, not one person in 9 years, other than Elisa, who is here with me tonight. She's my fiance. Ever grabbed me by the back of the neck and ever said anything about my drinking to me. So I was this undercover alcoholic for years. But the year before I ended up going into rehab in 2016, I was the first guy in the liquor store at 9 o'clock in the morning, and I was the last guy in the liquor store at 11 o'clock at night. And Elisa would come home and find me on the couch at 3:30 in the afternoon, passed out. And I was trying to kill myself. I never had the balls to actually kill myself, but I was literally trying to drink myself to death. And I woke up one morning and I couldn't feel my arms and I couldn't feel my legs. I couldn't see. I lost my vision. And I thought, okay, this is what I've been asking for. The universe is finally going to let me go. And I thought I had a terminal illness. So I went to the hospital. It turns out I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. My pancreas stopped producing insulin. And that diagnosis saved my life. I left that hospital and I went straight to rehab. And I want to share one memory I have from rehab that I think about every single day. And it ultimately led me to this conversation with you all tonight. I was in rehab in a very special program. I went to a place called The Orchard. And I remember the very last day, I was just about to leave the next day. And you're with this group of people and everybody bonds because you're with them for 16 hours a day. You don't have a choice. And you get to know these people better than you get to know your own family. And this last day, what happened was the owner of the facility sat in the middle of a circle, had us all sit in these chairs around her. And we all thought we were getting this pep talk to go back into the universe, get back into the world and start our new lives. And she goes, I want you to look to the person to your left. So we all look to the person to the left and have this gagging, this dagger, pupil to pupil eye contact. And she goes, that person is dead in 365 days or less. And I just thought, holy shit. My heart dropped. The air in the room was completely sucked out. And she goes, look to the person to your right. And so we look to the person to the right. And she goes, that person is back in one of these facilities in less than 180 days. And I just thought, there's no way. This can't be true. And at that exact moment, I decided that I was going to spend the rest of my life trying to figure out how I can make an impact on what she just said. And I had no idea what that was going to look like. I had absolutely no idea. But I'll tell you what, a year after I got out of rehab, I got a phone call, and 8 of the 28 people were dead. My very close, the person that I bonded with the most, she died. And I just didn't know. So I just kind of thought to myself, okay, well, I've been an entrepreneur, and I'm going to take my skill set and I'm going to figure out how to make enough money to make a difference in this. And then I started to realize, oh God, everybody relapsed. There's nobody sober. Today, there's only 3 people that are sober from that group today. And so sure enough, I went and built another business, and it collapsed. And I was starting to have a tremendous anxiety. And I hadn't had a drink in 3.5 years at this point. This is now September 2019. And I got introduced to mushrooms. And somebody sent me some microdosing capsules. And the microdosing capsules actually led me to this prolific experience. I couldn't believe it. I was problem solving differently. I was thinking differently, way more strategy. And ultimately that led to me wanting to see how the microdoses worked for other people. At that time, there was no research. There was nobody talking about this in Calgary. Obviously here in British Columbia, where I am now, they were way ahead of this. But where I was in Alberta, this wasn't a conversation happening in the cafes and the bars and the lounges, and it just wasn't happening. And so I ended up putting a self-funded study together. It's never been replicated to this day. And I asked 40 people to come in and that had never microdosed before. I teamed up with a friend of mine who had a background in psychology, and we put a questionnaire together. It was a 16 basic questions. And we were trying to get an idea as to where people's mental health was, where their creativity was. And we share all of this on our website that you guys can go and look at. And so everybody filled out the questionnaire. I supplied the medicine. I did a 1-hour intake with all 40 people. It sold out in 24 hours. I absolutely couldn't believe it. This is actually where I met Brett. And at the end of it, everybody had to fill out the same questionnaire. And I hired somebody to tally the data, and the data was incredible. The way the needle moved in these people's lives in 42 days was something I'd never experienced in my entire life. And 2 of the 40 people came out and said, and I have this filmed, and we're actually just about to release this footage, that study saved their life. And so I knew this project was going to be extraordinarily challenging, because all business is, but when you're doing something that no one's ever done before, and you don't really have anybody to follow or any leader to follow, it makes it much more challenging. And so I needed that ammo. I needed to know that this saves someone's life to move this project forward. And so that's a bit about my story. That's how mindfulMEDS began. That was now 4.5 years ago. It took us after that study, it was another 2 years before we actually launched a product into the marketplace. And so from day one, we've looked at this completely differently than the rest of the industry. And we want to share a bit about that with you this evening. So I want to pass this over to Brett. Brett's been my colleague, my partner, really since the study. And I'd like him to share a bit of his story, and then I'm going to let him lead out the evening from there.
Awesome. Thanks, Keegs. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. It's really just so awesome to be able to connect and talk about how this started, get into the mushrooms and how powerful they are. And they really are, when we unite with community and all our special skill sets, how we can utilize them. For me, I was in my early 20s. I was training for my first ultra marathon. And through this, I came across this mushroom called cordyceps. This immediately shifted my endurance. I was noticing that I was knocking time off my trials. My energy had increased. And even more surprising, my recovery had increased. So I was recovering faster. This sparked an interest for me around mushrooms and what these were, and fascination, really, where I dived straight down the rabbit hole and started to study these and integrate them into my life. A short while later, I'm out with some friends from college, and we're wrapping up for the evening. We're on our way home. It's that end of the night when there's people all over the place, and I lose track of my friends. I'm looking for them. I see a fella that they were chatting to earlier in the night, and I tap him on the shoulder and like, "Hey man, did you see where those guys you were chatting with went?" And he's like, "Don't fucking touch me," and gets all upset. I get about 10 yards ahead and pop. I wake up to this voice. "Brett, do you know where you are? Brett, do you know who you are?" And I had been attacked. These two guys had jumped me. I had a serious concussion, severe head trauma. My eye was so damaged, they weren't sure if I was going to be able to keep it or not. The pressure in my head was so big that they thought it might actually pop. I had broken orbital bone and nerve damage because of this. And this experience has really gifted me so many things and so many things in my life. One of those gifts was I was on a really intense lion's mane protocol during the 3 months I was on bed rest. And the inflammation I was experiencing from my head, I really hold a lot of value from the lion's mane and how that was able to reduce that. My face was a different, did not look like it does now. And I really promote a lot of that to the lion's mane and how it was able to boost my system and help with the healing factor. I was able to keep my eye just slight damage in the retina, and the majority of the nerve damage was to subside. And again, the mushrooms and the plants were a huge factor in this for me. So now, fast forward 6 years later, I'm now graduated. I'm doing the corporate thing, but I'm feeling just directionless a little bit. I'm feeling depressed. I'm just nothing is really making sense. I'm in this rut. I'm talking to a friend and he introduces me to this microdosing study. And like many at the time, I carried that same stigma. I knew a lot about functional mushrooms, but I was like, I thought mushrooms were a party drug. And to my surprise, the ADHD I struggled with my whole life was not so overwhelming anymore. And I was able to compartmentalize like I'd never been able to before. I could, without jumping to that next thing, I could really focus. This was really turning into a superpower for me. And that was even working into on my days off as well. So this was starting to carry over. I was starting to train my brain. This was life changing for me. This is where I met Keegs, and this is where we connected and yeah, began our journey with mindfulMEDS. As you can tell from our stories, mushrooms have played a huge role in both of our lives, and it's something that we've really felt drawn to share, and so grateful to be able to share with all of you, with community, and be able to source the highest quality mushrooms we can and create blends that can really help us evolve through these types of incidents and deficiencies. So where I'd love to start, we were at a microdosing event just recently at the University of BC, and the doctor Zach Bush said something: anything that can help a little can help a lot. And me and Keegs were chatting about this. This is a really powerful statement because this in a way is really defines what microdosing is. It's this it's this ability where it's boosting the serotonin, but it's pulling it off enough that we're able to pop out of it and really pop out of these funks, these emotions that are overwhelming us. A question that we get a ton, and rightfully so, with all the articles, all the mushrooms all over the place, and not a ton of definitive data. It can be really overwhelming. There's lots of different blends, lots of different companies, lots of different stuff going on. So it's like, where do I start? So it's a great question. And it initially starts with what drew us to microdosing, what drew us to functional mushrooms. What is it that we're trying to work through? Sometimes we don't know, but we feel drawn. Is it, you'll see in the chat there's a little chart, but like anxiety, fear. Are we looking for energy? Are we experiencing brain fog? These are all factors where we want to start so we can start to reverse engineer and find the dosage and the plants that are right to integrate in. With that dosage, it is really about finding the sweet spot. So when we're looking to do this, we're looking to find the dosage that is going to help us with what we're working through, and find that dosage that's not necessarily, they say sub-perceptual dose, but that's not really the best way to describe it. But it's that subtle dose where we don't necessarily super notice the difference, but it's enough where we feel lighter. We don't feel these emotions overwhelming us. Sometimes this takes a little time. The other piece, right, is we're always working through different things. Depending on where we're at, once we work through this, maybe our dosage might change a little bit. Or maybe it might be time for a break and we're going to a functional mushroom or something else. So this is where the scheduling is really important. This isn't a one-size-fits-all model, but from the data we currently have, we have the James Fadiman schedule, which is a 1 day on of the microdose and a 2 days off of the microdose. This is designed that way so we get that ease, we get that boost, but the theory with it is that you're going to have these carry over into the next day. So when we have that feeling of not feeling so overwhelmed by an anxiety, for example, that's going to carry over and snowball in itself and carry over into these other days while getting that boost another day. The other one is the Paul Stamets protocol, and that's a 5 days on of the microdose consecutively and a 2 days off. This is another protocol that has shown some serious promise. If you guys want to check it out, microdose.me is Paul Stamets, where they're gaining a lot of data. You can sign up and they have different questionnaires and stuff like that. And that's where they're getting this data around his protocol. This one can be really proficient if we're coming off pharmaceuticals, if we're working through some serious anxiety, some serious like overwhelming feelings where we feel a bit more of a need. If we're a little less, if we're more on not so sensitive and we need that more repetitive dose. Like I say, everyone's a little different. We all come from different heritage, right? We all come from different daily routines. So whether we're working construction, moving around all day, or if we're sitting at a desk, this can sometimes change the type of dosage that we need. The other thing we want to tune into is the time of day. So depending again on our daily routines, what we're trying to utilize the microdosing for, this might change whether we want to take it in the mornings before we go to work. If we're really feeling just anxious all the time, and I'm just using anxiety as an example, but if we're feeling anxious all the time and we're finding this eases that, and then we're having it, 30 minutes after our morning coffee or our morning breakfast, and then it's really helping throughout the day, this is going to carry over through the day. I have had some people say that they feel really good, but it's more that afternoon where they get that brain fog, they get that kind of thing. So sometimes in the afternoon after lunch, that can be a prolific time for people to microdose as well. So this is where we do have to ask ourselves, what are we utilizing it for? What are we trying to achieve with it? And this is where we get into the default mode network. A lot of us might know what that is. A lot of us might not. Either way, all good. The default mode network is that subconscious network. So that's like when we're driving and you're kind of like just doing your thing, and then you get to a traffic light and you're like thinking about something, and you're like, oh, I didn't even really tune into me driving there. You're just automatically doing it, right? But this is our subconscious network where when we have old beliefs that we're trying to shift that are maybe causing these anxieties or causing this resistance piece, if we can use the microdosing as a tool to ease that off and then input these new beliefs, it can really upgrade and evolve our default mode network. And that's where our intention is really powerful. We're really all about intention here at mindfulMEDS. That goes from from the mushrooms being grown to when I'm making the blends to when the blends are being put together at the facility. But why this is powerful. So if we're tuning into why we're microdosing, what intention we're trying to achieve, where we're trying to get to, we're not only that's resonating when we're telling that to ourselves, but then that's going to also really help when we're evolving that default mode network, right? Because we're inputting this new belief. We're using this as a tool to really shift our thought patterns. And yeah, so that I'd love to toss it over to you, Keegs, and then take us through a little bit about where these mushrooms are coming from and the education side of things.
Thank you, man. If you don't mind, I'm just going to follow up a little bit. So the default mode network, Brett, you nailed it, but it's also this little back portion of your brain. So if you have OCD, eating disorders, depression, anxiety, addiction issues, you're really caught in this portion of the brain. And what the science says, for anybody interested in the actual raw science, so Dr. Carhart Harris at the Imperial College of London, he came and put this study together, and they were trying to figure out what the hell was going on in the human brain when it came to taking psilocybin. And they thought there must be some sort of fireworks that are going on, some type of explosion happening in the brain. And what they came to find out was the actual cerebral blood flow. So the blood flow to that portion of the brain was actually cut off. And when you cut off that circuitry, when you cut off that blood flow to that portion of the brain, that's when you start to create these new behavioral patterns. And so that's when you start to see these new shifts, because your brain is forced to connect with other pieces of the brain that it usually doesn't talk to. So that's kind of the science behind it. Thank you, Brett.
Yeah, thanks, man. That's great.
And again, any questions that you guys have that shakes out of this, just make a note and we'll go deep on anything you guys want to talk about. So we spoke about the study, and part of it was like I needed some time to make sure that whatever we did was going to create the most respected microdosing company in the industry. And so we really started with a couple questions, and it was, how do we create the most consistent product in the market? Sounds simple, right? Like how do you do that? We were at an event in Vancouver in December, doing a little presentation. Room of about 30 people. Almost every single person that was there had microdosed that day or at some point that week. And the day of the presentation, I got this message. I'm going to read it to you guys. This came from a friend. I'm in Vernon. Brett's in Lake Country. And this is somebody really well known in the community in Vernon. She's a photographer. She actually did our company headshots. And I got this message from her one morning in December, and she goes, "My friend has a mushroom business." We all have friends with mushroom businesses, don't we? And they just gave me a bunch of 100 milligram capsules. So 100 milligrams, to put that in perspective, it's 1/10 of a gram, very small dose. And that's actually the dose that we ran the study on. And not one person in the study, one of the questions we asked was, did you feel high? Not one person felt it in their body. More to share on that if you'd like at the end. But she goes, they gave me a bunch of 100 milligram capsules, but it doesn't feel like a microdose to me at all, which I find odd because previously I've microdosed 150 milligrams and not felt anything. Is this normal? Like right now, I'm definitely at the edge of high to a degree that I absolutely wouldn't drive. My pupils are dilated and I can't feel my teeth. Just not sure if I should trust her capsules, but I'm asking you perhaps to see if I should go a different direction. Just to be clear, I'm not panicking. I'm just more curious. And so I shared that with the room in Vancouver, and almost every single person had an experience like that. And it brought me to this moment where I thought about my mom. I was at my aunt and uncle's about 2 years ago, and he's an old, kind of a hippie guy, and was growing his own cannabis. I'd never seen my mom smoke weed in my entire life, or smoked with her, of course. But they were sharing a story with me that they had rolled this joint, and my mom had 3 puffs, and she completely greened out, as they call it. And she was so embarrassed, and she'll never, ever go back to cannabis again. And what's happened to some people is they have this experience with microdosing and they'll never go back to it again. And so this is why consistency is so imperative. So what we did in the beginning is we went and bought the equipment. We sourced this high-end equipment, this machinery from India, had it imported into Canada during COVID. And I had to go and like break it out of the facility that customs was holding it in. And it was the first time I'd ever been masked and had to have this conversation. It's actually quite scary. But from day one, we knew how important this was to create the most consistent product in the marketplace. And that's what we've done. We've got 1.5 million microdosing capsules in the market in the past 4 years. And we have never had one person ever come back and share that experience with us, ever. And so we're very proud of that. So that's one of the things that really makes us different. And one of the things that I think is incredibly important. Every single time you have one of our products, you're going to get the same experience. And so really it started with that question. How do we create the most consistent product in the marketplace? The second question was, how do we create the safest product in the marketplace? So how do we define safe? What is safe? Mushrooms are supposed to be safe. But what we've come to learn and find out is that, like the consistency issue, almost everybody that's ever tried mushrooms, and maybe, let us know in the chat if this has happened to you, have had gut issues. So how many people have done mushrooms and then had their stomach inflate or thrown up afterwards, or just felt rotten because the mushrooms they ate? So what exactly is that? What is going on? Why are people having these experiences? And I asked the same group of people in Vancouver, and almost everybody responded, yes, I've had the inconsistency. Yes, I've had the stomach problems. What's going on? So this was on our radar from day one. And so one of the things that I want to share with you guys that we do here at mindfulMEDS that no one else in the industry has even thought about is this. So our mushrooms are 95% of the mushrooms that are grown in Canada are grown in someone's garage. They're literally grown in someone's garage, or they're grown in someone's closet. So they're not being grown in a purpose-built facility, okay? And I'm not saying they're all bad, but I'm just saying that you really want to know where they're coming from. You want to know whose garage they're coming from. And so that was something that we found kind of strange in the beginning. And it was just like, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so our grower that we get all of our mushrooms from, one, he's local. We go to him. We walk through the facility. It's a purpose-built mushroom facility. And it's somebody that operates with pure intention. So, and why that's important is what we've come to learn about mushrooms is they're so intelligent that they can literally pick up the vibrational frequency of the environment that they're in. So think about that for a second. If you're dealing with somebody who just got out of jail that's growing mushrooms, there's a chance that frequency is being put into the mushrooms. And so you really want to know where these mushrooms are coming from. And so not only have we taken those steps, but once we actually get the psilocybin mushrooms, we then ship them off to an indigenous healer. And this indigenous healer is in his 70s. His name's William. We've been using him now for 3 years. And he's been using frequency technology for over 50 years. And his frequency technology is picking up on heavy metals, pesticides, herbicides. And the biggest thing is mold content. What was screwing everybody's stomachs up was excessive mold content. So yes, of course, mushrooms, there is going to be an element of mold to them because it's a fungi. But if you overshoot the threshold of mold, people get sick. This is where people start to get headaches. And, you get an experience like this with somebody like my mom, for instance, they're never coming back to this. So we recognize exactly how important this is. So on top of that, he blesses the mushrooms. So our mushrooms are infused with his blessing. So we actually not only have the highest, cleanest, and highest vibrational frequency product in the market, but we've created the most consistent product in the market too. So I wanted to share that with you guys because I mean, we just constantly get people coming through our live chat going, man, I was trying something from another company, it screwed my stomach up, or, all of a sudden I was in the Zoom call and I can't even think about what I was speaking about because I was so high. Did anybody see Michael Bublé at the All-Star game the other day? He had a friend give him a microdose. He was in the celebrity part of the All-Star hockey game. And he had an interview afterwards, and he could barely speak because he was so stoned. It's kind of funny. Um, so that's the testing behind it. That's the mold content, the consistency, all things that are incredibly important to us. Brett, why don't I circle back to you? Talk to us about why we're stacking, what the importance of stacking is, why we create the different blends that we do, why we use functional mushrooms and other nootropics. Because you've kind of been the wizard in the kitchen, and I think people would like to know a little bit about that.
Yeah, thanks, man. Yeah, and just to touch on the testing a little bit too, like all of that testing being such a prominent piece for our golden teacher mushrooms, but this goes for our functional mushrooms as well. Incredibly important for me to being a mushroom lover, having these studying these plants and creating my own. Like it's been really, I took a lot of time to connect with a farm where they're going through the testing procedure, they're doing the proper growth procedures to have a clean organic mushroom that's grown on the proper organic material like it would in the wild, but that are also being tested for the proper nutrient density. So for example, something like cordyceps, like if it's a cordyceps militaris, we want to be testing for that cordycepin content because that's what's really driving the muscle. But all of these mushrooms are tested for the nutrient factor, but the purity, and this is the clarity of them as well. So they have no heavy metals, no toxins. And then, yeah, so functional mushrooms are really interesting because these are all mushrooms that have this beta glucan base to them, which is really powerful for our cellular health. But then they all have these different molecules that can really be promote different systems in our body. But what's interesting is we don't necessarily get these boosts from natural foods that we eat. So they can be a really powerful additional supplement. When I am making the blends that we create, what I've after studying some different plant therapies and working some formulas myself, these mushrooms seem to work really well when they're combined with a carrier plant and something to help activate the cell and add to the experience and help for the absorption rate, as well as when we're adding to, like say for an example, the microdosing, when we're adding a vitamin complex, the niacin, the minerals. So this helps with the blood-brain barrier. This helps with the whole overall absorption process. So a lot of intention goes into these blends in what we're trying to achieve. They're all designed for different ailments, which is all on our website. We can dive into some questions later. But this goes for if we're looking for energy or something like this, we then go for a cordyceps. And then what we've done is we've added like a ginkgo biloba, which is going to help with that overall blood flow and absorption of the molecules. So what we're really trying to do with stacking and with the functional mushrooms themselves, like what we produce all these molecules on our own, right? So what really happens is if we're in a stress state, if we're in an anxiety state, that's when we'll become nutrient deficient because we're not producing the same amount of serotonin, for example, as we normally would. So it's about getting the body back into homeostasis, back into coherence. So with stacking, there's a lot of data around, like say lion's mane, for example, showing the most prominent prominent results around 1,200 to 2,400 milligrams. So if we're able to provide that dosage, we're then getting the benefits of the microdose, but we're also improving to what we've seen in the studies to get the neurotropic factor, the nerve growth factor, for example. So a lot of times when you see these blends mixed together and of these different mushrooms, they'll be like 100 milligrams of this, 100 milligrams of this. It's all good because it's getting that beta glucan content, but you're not necessarily getting all the triterpenoids, for example, or something like this, like that would show the growth in the system. So what we've developed with stacking is how can we improve this and optimize this microdose experience by getting the healing factors of the functional mushrooms and the functional blends. And what's also really cool about this, and what we've both found in our own routines, and I'm sure a lot of the mindful community can speak to this, is what we talked about earlier with scheduling. After a month on, we also want to take that time off, but maybe we still want to get a nutrient boost such as maca because we're coming through a stressful time, or it's that kind of glum time of the year, for example. We can then switch over to a maca and continue to boost the system that way while we're on our time off, and then go back to a microdose after. So the stacking is really twofold in that it works really well with the microdose itself, but it can also be used in our daily routines to help boost and optimize the system. Did you want to open it up for some questions here?
Yeah, one last thing before we get to the questions. I just wanted to speak about this group of people that's here this evening, and this community that we're building. Um, you know, one of the biggest lessons that I've learned along the way that has shaken out of this project for me was I didn't realize that how people connected. And what I mean by that is I'd been in sales my entire career, and I used to walk into rooms and try to tell businesses how I could take them from A to B, or get things from A to B, and basically talk about all the wins. And what I've realized, and the way that we all connect as humans, is actually through the pain, because none of us are getting out of this experience without walking through that pain, and that's how we can all relate to one another. And I just wanted to share that because anybody that, part of the reason that we built this community, and I want to share some of the things that we're doing, is to make sure that people know that you're not in this alone, right? Like we're doing this together and we're learning together. And some of the things that we're doing that you're not going to find with any mushroom company in the world is this conversation. Okay. All the other mushroom companies are kind of hiding. And I'm not trying to shit on the industry because there are people that are doing this the right way. But I'll give you an example. We have a live chat on our website that runs 7 days a week. You wouldn't believe the effort that takes to run. And people can come in there 4 hours a day, every day, and talk to one of our founders and ask questions, and within minutes get an answer. You can't find that anywhere in this industry. Our microdosing guide, it's available for free to each and every one of you. And if you haven't read it, I would love for you to go and read it. It's 62 pages long. It's available on our website. We are going to make a shorter version, but we're talking about hundreds upon hundreds of hours of our time went into building that document that we just want to provide for free so that people can get educated. Because here's what we found. The people that go and spend some time to get educated like you are tonight, their experience when they collaborate with the education and the medicine, and you put those two together and you start to apply the tactics that we lay out in the guide, your experience is going to go through the roof. In fact, I have never met somebody along this journey that didn't have some positive outcomes when doing it that way. When you don't do it that way and you're just expecting to take a pill and your life is going to change, I just don't see it happening that way. It may be for some people, but the reality is that, the work, quote unquote. So, we're all doing the work. I've been in therapy for years. I go for walks in the morning. I try to get my feet on the ground. I go for, it's the little things, the breath work, eating a little bit healthier. All of these things, when you start to do them and you start to use the medicine in combination with them, you're going to change your life. And so we want to provide those tools. So, with the microdosing guy, the collaborations, I want to speak to you guys about the collaborations. I see a few names that I recognize here tonight that we're collaborating with already. But the whole point in building this business has been, how can we become so respected that we can work with the practitioners so that you can find our medicine in the mental health clinics, and so that's really the goal. So if you are a practitioner, if you are somebody that's a leader in your community, and you want to talk about ways that we can collaborate, I would absolutely love to do that with you. We answer all of our DMs. I voice note people every single day in the back of the Instagram. I respond to the emails, and we're going to continue to host evenings like this. This is the first one, and I think it's just going to continuously get better and better. So thank you for being here tonight, you guys. It means the world. It really does. And I honestly think the goal with this is just, actually, you know what? Why don't we do this? Why don't we open up the floor? And the best way to maybe do it is just to type your question in. Do you think that's the best way to do it, Brett? Or can we see
we can do that.
Somebody raises their hand? Can we see that?
Yeah. And just before we do that too, we have an email that'll go out later to any practitioners. Feel free to schedule. That'll have a link to schedule a call with either me or Keegs. We'd love to chat with you, like Keegs said. Then we also have a special discount code for everyone here tonight, 25% off, which is awesome. That's the biggest one we've ever done. So I'll have Elisa drop that in the chat there. Make sure to utilize that and answer. We're here for the next, however long you guys want to be here, and jam out some questions. I don't know what's easiest, if we want to put them in the chat, or we can open it up here, and I'll take the spotlight off and we can jam about some mushrooms.
Yeah, for sure. It looked like there was a bit of, I saw somebody had, amazing, you guys. I'm just surfing through. It's so great to have everybody here from all over the place. Incredible. Can we talk a little bit more about stacking? Absolutely. Love all the care in the products. Thank you so much, you guys. Hello, Keegan. Really appreciate your share. Very powerful. Just diving in. Started with your products 5 weeks ago. Ditched 20 years of pharmaceuticals and just had an MDMA journey a week ago. Wow. So excited about my future. I'm on the right track, but I'm looking for some personal guidance from your group to ensure I'm on the right path with the right products. I also have an 18-year-old son addicted to high THC sativa because of trauma. I need help to guide him. Thank you. Some of this is confidential. Yeah, happy to take that offline. More than happy to dive into that if you'd like to just keep it private. No issues at all. Maybe the best way to connect is through Instagram. But I will say, I've struggled with cannabis consumption. At the start of this project, Brett, you could probably remember this. We'd sit in my living room in my apartment, and I'd have 8 joints rolled in front of me. We'd have a 4-hour meeting, and I was the guy that you wouldn't even know was stoned, but I would be smoking weed all day. And one of the biggest takeaways in the beginning of microdosing and my journey with mushrooms was I was like almost instantly using less cannabis. And today it is about 1/10 of what it was at the beginning of this journey. So much support for people with addictions. And I mean, that could be a masterclass on its own. And maybe one night, if there's enough interest, I'll host that. But I really love the research that's come out. For anybody that wants to learn a little bit more about that, a simple Google, if you Google alcohol psilocybin study, Johns Hopkins University has put out some incredible research around this. And the results, I mean, they're enough to make your jaw hit the floor. It's incredible. So the strongest research that's out around this scientifically has been done by Johns Hopkins University, based around addictions. And then the other major one that stands out in my mind is end-of-life cancer patient anxiety. I don't know if anybody is interested in hearing about that or seeing the research, but it's compelling. And, the reason I bring this up is I had a near death experience. I didn't expect to be here on this call tonight. Let's just put it that way. And it's a scary thought to not know if you're going to be waking up. And I remember I was on the other end of a phone call when I was about 22 years old. It was my cousin, and he was dying of brain cancer. And it was his last call. He called me, and he was so scared to pass, and just didn't know. He was just terrified. I actually have a tattoo on my chest for him. But when I started this project, I got really interested in the research, and I'm just so grateful to know that there's so much support with mushrooms and people with end of life anxieties. Um, so yeah, so I hope that maybe helped that a little bit. Um, Brett, do you want to field a few of these?
Yeah, we can dive a little bit deeper into stacking. So yeah, stacking is also where it came from too, is like me and Keegs, and I nerd out on this stuff. Where mushrooms and plants are really cool is you can combine them and you can really get to some cool places as far as like getting to that flow state, but getting an energetic factor. So like for an example would be like if I wanted to, for me personally, I actually use a 50 milligram microdose. I like it to be quite subtle in my daily life. But what I'll do is I'll stack that with a lion's mane and a cordyceps because I like the extra energy and I like how cordyceps and lion's mane work for me. It adds to the blood flow. I find it adds to the nootropic factor. So that's an example of if you want to create your own stack. What we've done on the website is for each blend, I've designed recommendations for a stack. Another way we can do it is something like, say, the Happy Days, which is like a stress reliever, a little bit of an energetic, but really helps provide the nutrients to help the receptors ease out of that stress state. So that can sometimes be really helpful in the afternoon because what this is also going to do is when we ease out of that stress state, it's going to help the hormone balance. So this is also going to help regulate serotonin and melatonin. So it's going to aid with our sleep because sometimes when we're stressed, it also prevents our sleeping patterns. So a stacking option could be then the micro, the lion's mane, and the Happy Days in the afternoon, for example. It's kind of hard to just continue to spitball without having like direct knowledge on what you're trying to achieve, but it's basically using the knowledge around the mushroom to reverse engineer what we're looking to achieve and provide the nutrients. And if we can add the extra mushrooms to that experience, then we can optimize and boost the experience. Is that making sense? Yeah, yeah. Thanks, Deirdre. Her question is, can you talk about the main stacking protocols you typically recommend? Keegs, do you want to start off with what you recommend, and I'll go next?
Sure. Yeah, maybe we can kind of tether a couple of these questions together. So there's another question here that said, I just started Perform this week, just looking for a bit of a lift. Do you recommend trying one type at a time? And, we have all of these products. They're all different doses. It's like, why do we have so many? And the answer to that is honestly so many different days based on your mood and based on your activities is going to call for a different microdose. And so for me personally, before this call, I took two moderns and three lion's mane. And I find just for like acuity and my attention span and the way that my clarity, my brain is operating, honestly, it's just such an amazing combination. If you haven't tried it, I highly, highly recommend it for anybody that might be experiencing some brain fog or just really looking for clarity and a bit of a mood boost. But so that's what I did today. But this weekend I'm going to be outside. I'm going to be, going on a bit of a walk with Elisa. And so sometimes when you connect with nature, it's beautiful to take a bit of a stronger dose. So that's why we have the Inspire and the Voyage. But also, as we spoke about on this call, I'm in recovery, and the truth is it doesn't yes, it gets a bit easier, but the reality is with really high stressful situations and stressful moments, there was a pocket of time. This hasn't happened recently, but there was a pocket of time on this journey where I'd have a day where I'd be so stressed that I just wanted to like throw my laptop off the table. And it would be easier just to run to the bar and have a drink. And so that was like going through my head. And so those larger doses for anybody that's struggling with addiction or wants to maybe consider some other options than reaching for a drink in those moments, because we all have these moments, right? These high stress moments. These larger doses can take you back to baseline in half an hour to 45 minutes. And honestly, it works for me every single time. And so, and then, Brett will speak about, some of his favorite stacks, but that just gives you an idea. So every day could potentially call for a different microdose. I will say, Laura, that I do think it's important to develop a relationship with one before moving on to the next. So get to know how you feel with it. Spend a week with it. Get to know how you feel with it. Get to know how your body is responding, and then start to cycle something new in. But it's so incredibly safe to explore the dose. And honestly, there's days that I'll take a modern and then later in the day take a synergy. So it's very safe to take multiples, and it's very safe to mix and match. Our entire lineup has been designed to find your own personal sweet spot. So, Brett, why don't you talk a little bit about that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, definitely. Um, Yeah, Laura. So that's a great question, and I love that, Keys. It is usually like if you do go with one, it's best to give it that 2 weeks to 4 weeks. Give it a week at the one dosage, see how that goes, and then you can always either increase it or decrease it with something like the Perform. It's good to start. We always say low and slow. So one thing to keep in mind when with functional mushrooms, with the blends, these are some of them people notice that they'll work right away, but things like maca, things like lion's mane, they do show the best results after, you know, 10 to 14 days when we're consistently getting that boost, because this boosts the system and we're getting back into that homeostasis state. So everything's working properly, and then this will kind of overlap on itself, and ideally after that month we'll be back. We might not necessarily have to go back to it. Sometimes we just really like it as a boost. I know lion's mane's a big one for me. I think for you too, Keegs.
Yeah.
A great example of this too, Mark, if you don't mind me speaking to it, he's asked someone who struggles with ADHD, anxiety, low energy due to chronic fatigue syndrome and poor sleep. He said he's had a really great experience on the Inspire, and that's that with that overthinking, and it really helped break that negative feedback loop. So, that is a 250 milligram dose, but sometimes when we're dealing with these stronger issues that are really compiling on top of each other, that really goes to what Keegs mentioned there, and it helps just break that negative feedback loop. And when we can break that, then we can pop out of that, right? And then we can apply these new patterns, and then maybe we can bring it down to say 100 or 150 kind of milligram dose. But that's if 250 works for you, then that's also everyone's a little bit different, right? So that's again the sweet spot for something like that, Mark. Like I'd also recommend after either if that 250 daily dose is your perfect dose and sticking with it, maybe adding in some lion's mane, like I mentioned with the happy days, taking the happy days about half an hour to an hour after lunch. This is going to really help ease with those stress fatigue syndromes, because this is really ashwagandha, holy basil, very nutrient, vitamin, mineral dense. So this is going to help boost the system out of that stress state, which in turn is also going to help with our sleeping patterns. And what's really amazing about this is just that little, like that goes back to that comment at the start, just a little thing doing a lot is it, then we get a proper sleep, and then the body starts to work properly again, right? So once we can pop out of this, it really starts to fold over on itself, and it's just about keeping it repetitive and then also continuing to, yeah, any other tools with it. This is when microdosing can really work. And Mark, if you have any other questions like the ADHD thing, I'm super happy to help, man. Like as far as like reading techniques, applying these different techniques with while we're on the microdosing can be really powerful. For me with my ADHD, the microdosing played a huge role, but then it was also, trying to read a little bit every day, applying some different breath techniques when I did feel it kind of going away, and kind of getting back into coherence with just some nose breath, and so I can bring it back, and like, because it is going to be that little bit, But what happens, it feels like we're not going anywhere sometimes, but we actually go a long way and there's no going backwards, right? So it can really be really powerful. And this is where community is really powerful too, when we can all connect and grow that way.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, the ADHD one's huge. I also was diagnosed at the very start of this project. I found myself, it was actually coming from a place of excitement. I'd never been so excited to start something in my lifetime that I was doing laps in my kitchen at 2 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep. Literally had my journal and I was like scribbling. I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't turn my brain off. I was so excited about where this was going. And but I had to figure out how to get my sleep in line. And I remember having an appointment with my doctor and filling out this this survey and giving it back to him. And he came back and he's just like, man, you're off the charts on every single question. You definitely have ADHD. Sent me to a psychiatrist, had an appointment with him, and at the end of that psychiatrist appointment, I I was given a Vyvanse prescription. I went to go see that night two friends from high school for wings, just a couple sober buddies from high school. And I told them how excited I was to get this diagnosis to finally explain what was going on with me and that I was going to get on this Vyvanse. And they both looked at me and said, dude, you cannot take Vyvanse. The next thing you know, you're going to be snorting it. And he was right. So I never filled that prescription. And I'm just so grateful for that. Microdosing and lion's mane has really worked well for me to stay off all prescriptions for ADHD.
Yeah. The Lisa asked here, can you explain how the quality control works with the mold? That is her main concern. Super good question, Lisa, and it's a super important thing.
Yeah, Brett, why don't you like that's something, why don't you chat about that a little bit, just about your knowledge with the frequency technology?
Yeah, sure. So mold itself with the mushrooms is more happening when it's either so especially as the industry's really blown up, sometimes these grow facilities have grown too quick and then the environment, it's mushrooms, it's super important that it's deep bacterialized, super clean environment when they're growing the mushrooms, right? So if they're growing the mushrooms and it's not quite clean or there's some sort of outside mold that has occurred on the mushrooms or in the drying state, if they haven't been completely dried, it can get mold contamination. And this is what really participates in gut rot. So if that, I hopefully that answers that from being a main concern with the mushrooms itself. For us, where we grow in very small batches, and they are consistently testing the air quality, the cleanliness, everything is just up to code as far as testing and bacteria sprayed down, washed, the whole 9 yards. So they're monitoring it constantly. And really the trick has been for them too, is they have contained growing facilities. So it's very they're in complete control of the whole process. What Keegan is speaking to with Will, what he works with is called, I don't know, if it's been popping up more and more. This has been around forever, but it's called scalar energy. It's called scalar technology. This is basically like um, frequency that can penetrate the cell. So this is where it can be really powerful for healing and this type of thing. And it can also be used in testing and charging mushrooms and different and water and all sorts of different things. And really just starting to experience and get more and more data on it all the time of what can be done with it. But this is what Will has worked with for many years, and where he is testing the mushrooms and then charging them. And like he said, if we ever get any mold content, we don't use that mushroom, but they're always being charged, tested for mold, so we always know they're pure. And then he's also then going. He works in quantum healing, so he's also then quantumly blessing them and working with them there. But the data on that is newer, becoming more and more as far as we learn more and more about quantum mechanics and quantum biology and stuff. But hope that answers your question, Lisa. That's like as far as the mold goes, like that's just that stringent process that the growers go through.
Yeah, thank you. And honestly, if for some reason we don't get the answer that you were looking for, just come through the DMs. Every single question that you guys have through this is going to be answered. And so I promise you that. So if we, for whatever reason, you want to learn more, or maybe we didn't answer it the right way, just simply let us know and we will do it. Renee, this is a really good question. Why is Mindful Meds not selling whole mushrooms? Um, and yeah, honestly, we're kind of bummed about it. We want to be, but we really have this vision of working with the practitioners. And the reality is right now we think we're the most aligned, and we're positioned better than any other mushroom company in North America to work with the practitioners. The challenge is that the stigma when it comes to whole mushrooms is so much bigger than the stigma with microdosing. And so, in order to just stay in alignment with working with practitioners, is the reason that we remove them. We still have access to them, and that might be something that over time we reconsider. But really, this has been about how do we make sure that this doesn't end? We've got almost 5 years of work in this, and how do we make sure that we keep the lights on, not just for ourselves, but for this community? And so we had to make a really challenging decision to stop, to stop having them on the menu. I did. I wish we didn't. Honestly, I wanted to keep them on. But we have access to them, and if you need them, just reach out, and we can point you in the right direction.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Nice. You're
Hey,
loud.
man.
Yeah, the reason I like the whole mushrooms, like I do the microdosing. I just like the spiritual aspect of taking the mushroom out and selecting my piece and adding, sometimes I'll add some lion's mane to it and I'll measure it all out, like a little bit of niacin sometimes and whatever, and just the whole process of putting it all together is, I don't know, I just like it.
Yeah. And super
rather
powerful,
than
man, when you
rather
connect with
than
the
dumping
mushroom like that.
dumping a pill out of the bottle and just taking it. Not that I've made some capsules before, but I just still like the idea of the whole mushroom idea.
I'm with you, man. I do too. I do too. Um, and stay posted. I mean, like I said, we just want to keep this going for as long as we possibly can, and that was a really tough decision that we made, but that's why we made the decision, was so that
Yeah,
we can work with the practitioners. And
I,
yeah,
I get that. I get that for sure. We don't want it to, become when it becomes like really truly to the medical side and they start prescribing this stuff to people, we don't want to make it look like a street mushroom. We want it in a nice little capsule for for everyone to consume.
Yeah. Well, I really applaud you, and I love that because that's, that connection, that intention, it's so powerful in the process, right? Like in that piece of it. Unfortunately, it's just like it's what that consistency that Geek spoke to, and being able to provide that where when it's loose, it opens up so many more variables, right? Like
For
in the
sure.
macro process, how it's being taken, the environment it's being taken in, how can we responsibly sell it when we can't necessarily provide that container, right? And like
Yeah,
and
I get
and so
I
there's
get that.
just in that new industry, it's kind of like, but it's something macro experiences has been, it's a huge part of my life, and it's been something that um, yeah, so powerful. I think for Keeks too, and probably a lot of people here, and that piece of being able to connect with it, and that with when I was discussing intention, even with that with the capsules, when we're able to do that, just taking like a little coherence breath and getting into coherence for a second and setting the intention of why we're taking that microdose, what we're trying to achieve, that affirmation can be really powerful for the experience.
Mhm.
yeah. Thanks, Renee. Let's go to Lauren's iPad. She says, when you take the functional supplements, you recommend taking two at a time. I just started last week with micro and happy days. It's probably a good one for you, Brett. And maybe we've covered this a little bit, but
Yeah, that's a great one. So Yeah, two of the functionals, micro, you're probably doing the one micro, and two of the happy days. Either stacking them together, uh, or you can spread them out and do it in the afternoon. Like I mentioned, if you are struggling with sleep or anything like that, that can be also a powerful way to stack. So if you're looking for that extra boost with the micro itself, then stacking the two happy days with the micro. Or if you're looking to extend it throughout the day and you're looking for maybe a little bit of hormone regulation, a little help with that sleep, then you can take it in the afternoon, the happy days in the afternoon, the micro in the morning.
Thank you.
Sane asked one here. Any studies on microdosing in menopause, alleviating symptoms, as well as protective factors such as brain health, bone health, etc.? There aren't any direct microdosing studies. We were actually talking about this last night at this event, and there's really in North there's not a ton of microdosing studies at the moment, but there are starting to become more and more. Menopause itself, though, I have worked with a couple different clients that it's been a really powerful thing, especially something like the maca. Sometimes in the menopause, it can be really helpful again with these vitamins, nutrients, minerals to help balance the system. And then the microdosing also helps boost that serotonin a little bit. So something that might be really good is the connect with the maca and then the happy days in the afternoon or any one of those three.
Yeah. If you follow us on Instagram, send us a DM because I actually have a little bit of stuff on this too that I can send you. Um,
Did you come across the study?
it's not a study, but it's a podcast actually, and
Oh,
I
cool.
wasn't able to listen to it all, but it was somebody that seemed highly educated, and I can certainly point you there. That might be helpful. Ideas for sleeping. I struggle with
Sleeping.
sleep.
This is
Sleep has been a challenge for me as well. And this continuously comes up. Brett, do you want to speak about that? Because you've been working on the sleep side of things for a little while.
Yeah, so there's the reishi mushroom is really great for sleep. I have had a sleep blend in the works for a little while. So there, stay tuned. There will be something coming. But like I mentioned, the happy days, this one can be really powerful for sleep, especially taken in that afternoon because that's helping balance our serotonin, melatonin. So if we're able to do that, we're going to produce that melatonin more throughout the day, so we fall asleep at night. There's some pretty good data out there showing when we microdose that this eases the anxiety, eases the stress, these types of things. So that overall is going to help with our sleep. So like an overall sleep package, I'd be like I'd mentioned there, like doing the micro or the modern, and then the happy days in the afternoon is like a great sleep combo. If you do really want to take it up another notch, is taking two of the immunity in the morning as well because of these mushrooms that are in there, reishi, chaga. They're going to really help have these terpenoids that are going to really help with boost the system, which overall, when our system's running better, we're going to have easier time sleeping.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, brother. The sleep one's huge, and honestly, we that's something we're working on, and I cannot wait to have it because I've been struggling with sleep as well, and I think a lot of us do. But reishi mushrooms. Here's a question: do you develop a level of tolerance, and then you need to stack with a higher dosage? So yes, what's wild about mushrooms, and wild in the sense that I was really fascinated with this piece. And the reason being is because I come from this background of being an addict. And I really didn't want to ever touch anything that anybody could potentially get addicted to. And so, what I'm really, really happy about is the research has come out around this that there is no chance of creating a chemical dependency to mushrooms. And here's why. So, if you on a Friday were to do 3.5 grams of mushrooms, for instance, you're going to likely have this intratraversal travel experience. If you did that exact same dose on a Saturday, your experience is going to be different. It's likely you're just going to see changes in color. Music might sound a little bit better. Maybe you have some giggles. But if you did that same dose 3 days in a row, nothing happens, nothing. And so you do develop a tolerance very quickly. And so it's very important that you stick to one of the protocols. And the reason that you're not taking mushrooms every single day is because you start to create that tolerance. And so that's why even just taking one day off, if you take 2 days off, it completely resets that tolerance to give you that same experience that you had the first time that you took the medicine. For anybody that's interested in learning a bit more about that, How to Change Your Mind, one of the most incredible books written on by Michael Pollan around all of this stuff. It's actually a Netflix documentary now. You can go and watch the one on psilocybin. But in that, he references a study regarding, it was a rat study, and everything starts with these rat studies. But what he said was they put a bunch of rats in this cage, and they had 2 drips. One was a cocaine drip, and the other one was a psilocybin drip. And the cocaine drip, the rats would go to, and they would drink and drink and drink and drink and drink and drink until they died. And of course, when they went to the psilocybin drip, they'd take one sip of it and they'd never come back to it again. And so that just kind of reiterates what I was saying about how it doesn't create a chemical dependency, but you do create a tolerance to it. And that's why it's really important to take the breaks. Here's another one from Kevin. Thank you, Kevin. And that last one was for Linda. Thank you, Linda. How do you target your type? So your type of microdose, I'm assuming, and dose for people with high anxiety? Happy to grab that one. Really, this circles back to something Brett said earlier. It's really important to just go slow, low dose and go slow. For many people with high anxiety, for a very short period of time, your anxiety might get, it might actually increase for a few days. I know it's very challenging and it sounds awful, but in almost every case, when you stick with it into week 2, you start to completely dissipate. But with that, you just really want to take it easy. Just go slow. We have doses that are 50 milligrams. It's really the lowest dose in the industry. I've never seen it anywhere, but that's where I would start in this case. And just develop your relationship with the mushroom. And as soon as you kind of build that relationship, then you can start to add a little bit, start to look at a bit of a higher dose. So that is not something that happens with everybody, by the way. About 1 in 10 people that have high anxiety are going to have that experience, but still important to mention because that might happen. There might be somebody on this call that's happened too. But this is just simply, you go low and slow. Not one of us on this call are going to have the same sweet spot. We keep talking about this sweet spot, but what we found fascinating through our thousands of people that have ordered over the years and the thousands of conversations that we've had, we have a friend that is 5'2" and she's 100 pounds, but she takes a dose that's 3 times the dose that I take. So how does that even work? And what we've come to learn is that all of us have these different digestive enzymes inside of our bodies. And so the way that we metabolize the psilocybin is very different in each of us. So it's so important to, yes, get a baseline of knowledge, but just know that it's so extraordinarily safe to keep playing with the dose until you find what works for you. And I strongly encourage you to do that.
Yeah, I'm glad you bring that up, Keeks, because that's actually an interesting example. I was talking to this friend and she was using that dose for a period of time. And I just learned recently that she's actually cut that dose in half. But it shows like someone who, like, when they were having those heavier bouts, they needed like a bit of a heavier dose. But as they worked through that and that started to compile, they've actually now cut that dose back. So it shows it's a really great example of how, depending on these different states that we're in, the different dose that we may need. So it is about starting to empower and starting to learn our bodies a little bit, how we respond. That's where the journaling can be really helpful, right? Just starting low and slow. I mean, having a journal or your notepad on your phone, just like if there's a time in the day where you're feeling that anxiety come up, really bad, just take a little note. Like maybe take a look around, like what's your surroundings? Is there something that's that's occurring. Just don't even, it doesn't have to be, try and let it go. But, or is your day going by and you're recording it at the end of the day and you're like, oh, wow, I actually didn't have that same anxiety. I didn't have that stress. Then you can, as that starts to happen, you can kind of start to see what's working. Maybe the dose needs to increase, maybe it needs to decrease, maybe it's perfect. You can always also see what days those stressful times are coming up or what's coming up. So then when you see that, you can also be like, okay, maybe there's something going on there. Is there something that I can use this now to evolve through, right? So we can kind of use these tools at our disposal to help with that too.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to add one thing, because one of the questions that we get so often is, if somebody's taking an SSRI or an antidepressant, they've been on this prescription that their doctor gave them. And there's so many people that have been on these and find themselves stuck. And we get in these conversations with people that, got diagnosed with, mild depression in high school, and 20 years later, they're still on the same pill, and they're numb, and they can't access their feelings. They're deeply struggling. So, I just wanted to speak about this a little bit, because one of the things that we're extraordinarily passionate about is helping people find the path to safely come off of these SSRIs. And what we've learned about this is both the SSRI and the microdose is trying to attach to the same serotonin receptor. And so what the published research around this, and there's just very little, but it is pointing towards this being very safe to combine. And I still highly recommend, if this is a question that you have, that you do speak to your doctor about this. But some of these doctors don't, they're being paid to keep you on these. And so, it's challenging to have these conversations with them. So, what we recommend is, if that is you, is that you begin to tailor your dose down. So making sure that you're slowly coming off of your SSRI. You can't just shut it off. It's very dangerous to do that. But very safe to use psilocybin as the bridge to help you with the withdrawal symptoms that not everybody experiences. But 50% of people that come off these SSRIs have enormous withdrawal. I mean, I'm talking withdrawal that in many cases can be as challenging as heroin to come off. And so 50% of people don't have any withdrawal. Just depends where you come, where you fit in that bucket. But the people that are coming off these SSRIs generally are going to need a stronger dose. So
yeah, that's a great thing
I
to
don't
bring
know
up.
if that question was asked, but it's a question we get a lot of.
Yeah, I just got, maybe you want to do one more or a couple more here?
Yeah, let's do two
Any
more.
any advice for someone with colloitis? So much study around the emotional aspect of the gut-brain disconnect. Is there a good product to start with that could help? Colloitis is like inflammation of the bowel. And yes, there definitely is. So one that actually is shown in several studies to be prominent for the bowel and the overall gut health is turkey tail, which we do have, which is really good for the overall gut health. And then I actually created an immunity blend focused on gut health and the vagus nerve, and that being that largest data highway, as we know, to these serotonin and dopamine systems. This is also, the gut is also behind these organs and stuff, is where we're producing serotonin and dopamine and all these different molecules. So like the gut is a super important piece, and a lot of times it's been really interesting. Just an example of sometimes people even coming into their microdosing journey and their gut's not right, and this causing, sometimes microdosing can infatuate something that we're not looking at, right? So it actually makes this more prominent, and we talk with them, and it's actually about coming off the microdosing for a second, getting on the immunity, getting that gut health, that boost in the gut and the organ health, and then going on to the microdosing. Then it's really successful. But the gut health, super important thing. And for something like that, Laura, I'd start with the turkey tail and then look to add in the immunity as well.
Thank you. And you know what? I think we maybe just cap it there, you guys. I'm so, so grateful for all of you being here tonight. And if we missed anything, we're just a simple DM away. We'll get to absolutely every question. I think we got them all. But if we missed any, we'll circle back. Thank you guys. I hope everybody has a great night. Appreciate you all so, so much. And yeah, can't wait for the next one of these.
Thanks, guys.